Hello and welcome to everyone. All right. So my name is Bob Koehler. I am a self-described peace journalist. I write a column, a syndicated column that's syndicated by actually the Chicago Tribune, and I worked there for as an editor for about 14 years. My website, just so you know, is commonwonders.com, and also if anyone wants to get on my mailing list, just email me at kohlercw@gmail.com and let me know, and I can put you on my mailing list. I write a column every week. So I am working on a project, a book. The working title is The Possible Future. And, basically it's a book about a paradigm shift, beyond an us versus them world, beyond the world of, violence and domination to a world of connection. And we live in that world. Of course, we already live in that world, but we don't acknowledge that we live in that world. That's really, I mean, when I think of violence, I think about the entertainment industry and how, simple violence is, to solve a problem when there are no consequences. Violence, as I have said in the past, is God's gift to scriptwriters. There simply are no consequences when you punch a bad guy in the face or when you shoot him, but in real life, of course, there are consequences. Okay, so I am going to, anyway, so one of the main things that my book is about is this concept called restorative justice. Now, I assume, some, maybe all of you are familiar with that concept. It's been around for a while now, and it's been gaining a foothold for 10, 12 years now. It's kind of, getting into the public school system in Chicago, certainly, and in other ways. One of the ways that restorative justice, basically what it, and actually what the piece I will read is going to be about that. In fact, let me just start by reading a column that I wrote a number of years ago called Power With, Power Over. And it was written in 2009. And I mentioned a young man named Darian Albert who had recently been murdered. And this was just before I began, learning about restorative justice. Somebody had told me about the peace circles. I signed up for some training. And this is a column that I wrote after one of my training sessions. So I will begin this, and then we'll just open it up for conversation. I don't know if words can transform the world. I know they can't bring back a murdered child, but I have a few of them to scatter on the grave of Darian Albert, the Chicago boy whose brutal slaying 2 weeks ago stunned the city and the nation. The words are power with, not power over. I would ask that we sit with these words for a moment. In his name, in the name of uncountable others, until we feel a click of understanding, until profound possibility slides into place. We can make this a different sort of world, And the simplest, perhaps the only way to begin, is by altering our relationship with power and with each other. I say this having spent the weekend sitting in a peace circle, opening myself up, laughing till the tears streamed, looking into the eyes and bared souls of 14 other people. The idea was to talk about violence in Chicago and around the world. But far more importantly, the idea was to build trust and develop an honest communication with one another as we sat together in all our wariness, egoism, and self-doubt, in a sort of vibrant equality. The first premise of a circle like this is that everyone's presence is vital. The ones with whom I disagree, the ones I don't quite trust, and even my own. Making a concept like this real is not easy, but what we begin to generate when we do so, when we listen with deep respect, when we speak our riskiest truths, when we discover our common humanity, is a collective energy that cannot help but change the world. It's called, for lack of a better word, love. And it's a force older than violence. And this is the term power, and this is what the term power with means. Finding the leverage to meet my needs and accomplish my goals in partnership with others, not by dominating or outsmarting them or by beating them to the pot of gold. Cultivating the discipline to do this does not mean, as so many fear, a subordination or loss of self, but precisely the opposite, the fulfillment of self beyond the wildest dreams we might spawn in our isolation. Nor does it mean the sudden disappearance of conflict, or eerily its pseudo-disappearance, the burial under a New Age platitude. Can't we all just get along? On the contrary, conflict is welcome. A core premise of the growing movement known as restorative or transformative justice is that conflict is opportunity. This is where we have our greatest chance to grow. At the friction points, as our emotions are heating up, we just have to face the situation with openness, calm, and courage. Once again, this is no easy task, but the more we work at this, the more we realize the value of doing so, and the less inclined we become simply to swat our difficulties and the people we blame them on out of the way. I'm convinced that uncoupling our inclination to dominate others, and to embrace power with them as our prime approach to life is the fundamental emotional shift necessary for the creation of lasting peace. All of which leads me to the world to which I return after my Peace Circle weekend, the one in which two mobs of angry boys recently converged after school and went at each other with 2x4s and splintered railroad ties. Darian Albert, age 16, an honors student, was simply waiting at the bus stop. He got swallowed up in the melee and was beaten to death. His murder was still so fresh and raw, we couldn't help but hold the tragedy in our hearts over the weekend as we talked about crime, punishment, and the criminal justice system. Here's the thing, though. This horrifying incident is just another symptom of a city, a nation, and a world at perpetual war with itself. It's merely one in a series of tragedies that we are numb to, or that we never hear about, or because it happens overseas and at our hands, and we call it war, we wholeheartedly support. Even worse, it's part of pop culture. Violence is our national distraction. We consume it as entertainment, whether in the movies or in the news. And when it gets out of hand, we try to counter it with more of the same. We call it revenge, we call it punishment, or we just call it victory. We support it with trillions of dollars annually in our military, small arms, prison, and entertainment budgets. We are ever so careful not to see the larger context in which acts of terrorism or school shootings or any other act of violence occurs. We think we can distinguish between good violence and bad, and we condemn only the violence that isn't institutionally sanctioned. So in the name of one more precious child whose life was senselessly cut short, let us sit with the distinction between power with and power over, and quietly imagine what life would be like if the latter were not our default setting. Let us imagine valuing empathy over victory and teaching our children the skills of complex connecting. Let us imagine the coming of the light. So, well, thank you for that, and I'd like to open this up, if to conversation, to one of the idea of conflict as opportunity. Conflict. Actually, I'll read one more thing. This is from a book by Mary Parker Follett. It's a book of essays, called The Profit of Management, and it was written. These are her writings. This was written in the 1920s. So somebody, told me about this book after, in response to that column I had just read. I'll read just a little piece here from, what she's talking about, conflict. Okay, she says, as conflict, difference is here in the world, as we cannot avoid it. We should, I think, use it. Instead of condemning it, we should set it to work for us. Why not? What does the mechanical engineer do with friction? Of course, his chief job is to eliminate friction, but it is true that he also capitalizes friction. The transmission of power by belts depends on friction between the belt and the pulley. The friction between the driving wheel of the locomotive and the track is necessary to haul the train. All polishing is done by friction. And then she says, the music of the violin we get by friction. And I'll stop there, but she talks about, what she talks about in her essay here is, basically she talks about three ways to deal with conflict. One of them is called, domination. Has anyone ever heard of that? I win, you lose. All we have to do is look at the news and there's domination going on everywhere, and it accomplishes absolutely nothing except to aggravate the problem and keep violence begets violence. It keeps it ongoing. The second way to deal with conflict is, according to Parker Follett, is compromise. Okay, sure. Yeah, I give in, you give in. But she makes an important point. Nobody gets what they want here. There's really no, change, nothing new is invented or created. so it doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't really solve the issue. Both people are like, okay, well, yeah, and they'll make it, this will be better than nothing. Okay. And sometimes conflict or compromise, it is necessary and you do it, but it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't actually create peace. The third method that she talks about is, she calls it integration. I think another term for it simply could be transformation. You bring the two issues together. You talk about them openly. I want this, the other guy wants that. Instead of trying to destroy the other guy and win, or to give in, you figure something out that solves both issues. And she makes an example. She creates an example. This was from the 1920s about these milk truck drivers who are unloading their cans of creamery at a loading dock that's on a hill, and the guys coming from downhill think they should be able to unload first. The guys coming uphill think, no, we should unload first. There's a big fight about this, but somebody helps them work out the issue, and what they decide to do is change the position of the loading dock so that they can both unload at the same time. In other words, real true peace, dealing with conflict involves creating something new, and then the actual issue is solved. It doesn't mean there aren't more issues, but that's not the issue anymore. The next issue is at a different level. So that's Mary Parker Pollitt's point to make in all this. So if people are, I would be interested to know, and well, one, if you've got any questions, let's put them out there. And two, if you've got any examples of, conflict as opportunity, conflict that created something new, let's talk about that. I mean, that's actually one of the things I'm really interested in. The book that I'm working on wants to address these sort of issues, So I don't know, how should we, if you want to talk, I don't know, raise your hand or unmute yourself, and, kind of let's jump into the conversation.
Kate, I see that your hand is up if you want to speak.
Thank you. Bob, thank you for this. It was really enlightening, and I wish I took better notes. Could you spell the name of this Mary person so that we could, because those 3 A's is really important, I think, for me.
Okay, anyway. Absolutely. Mary, and then it's on, well, actually, it looks like her last name is just Follett. Mary Parker, and then Follett, Follett.
Okay.
And she has a book of essays called Profit of Management. And the essay that I read about is simply called Constructive Conflict. That's the chapter in the book.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And
thank you, Bob, so much for sharing what you did. I'm thinking about a few examples of constructive conflict or creating something new. I'm remembering a story of 2 companies that were competing for the right to purchase oranges, and there was like big competition. The price was getting gouged, and I'm guessing this was in South America. I can't remember all the details, but they ended up realizing that one of them needed the peels for the fragrance, and the other one was planning to harvest the flesh for juice. So they were able to come to a constructive resolution to that conflict, and they could use the same product. So it wasn't, and they didn't waste it. So there you go. Then I think about Palestine and Israel, and there's a lot of strict, religious laws, both from the Orthodox Jewish side and the Muslim side, but it works very well in keeping businesses running all week long, because you've got the Muslim shops that stay open on the the Jewish Sabbath, and you've got and the Christian Sunday, and you've got the Jews and the Christians who operate their businesses on Juma, on Friday when they're at the mosque. So you can find ways to live together. And anyway,
you can live together without bombing each other, hopefully.
Yeah.
And okay, that's very important. That's very, very important. And I think not every solution or not every act of nonviolent conflict discussion solves an entire large issue, but they work together. I mean, peace is a long, slow process of many links, and but it's not created by violence. It's created by doing whatever you need to do, and if you can find your way to a resolution, or the change that honors all sides, and that creates creates a world that works for everyone, well, that is called peace. And there is no peace there's no peace any other way that there's only peace as the lull between while people reload. That's peace, but that's not the kind of peace that is what I'm looking for, or what anyone is looking for.
Well, I love that you specify how creating something new out of a conflict doesn't mean you won't have future conflict, right? But we all know in our personal relationships, when we're able to hit that point where just this relationship isn't working, and we can work it through so that we're both satisfied. When we do that, the relationship is stronger. So you build trust with your quote unquote enemy or your partner in conflict. And then you're more likely to return to that co-creation, the next opportunity you get.
Right, so, exactly. Yeah, not only did you deal with the initial issue, you created the context in which future issues can also, be dealt with. And when you don't deal with an issue that way, but just, whatever, domination being absolutely the worst one in a relationship, but not, but something that is present, all you do is make the next project worse, or the next problem worse. And so, so dealing with personal relationships and dealing with global relationships, seem to be pretty similar in many ways. And, and they're both complex.
I think there's another dimension here that maybe Mary Parker Follett doesn't touch on, but there's also the way of just ignoring a conflict and acting like it doesn't exist, which almost always leads to just like this spiral where the relationship separates. And bridging that and coming back together is so difficult.
Yeah, right. I mean, yes, ignoring the conflict, walking away or running away from it, or putting, putting this screen up in your brain so that you can't see it. Yeah, that the only way is to pull that, pull that screen away and actually look at it. I mean, look at it, face it honestly. I mean, she makes a point, she's a mediator, as I understand. And, and she's talking about, like, in union management issues, you've got to actually be open and honest about what the issue is, and not, put something else out, in the hopes of, well, we'll compromise later, but we've magnified, our demands so that when we do compromise, we won't, get less than what we want. That doesn't work in the process of actually trying to deal with it. You need to have an open, honest conversation about what it is that you want, need, and demand. And so
Could
that,
you-
no, go ahead.
As you and Jenny were talking, I was thinking of some of our indigenous eco leaders like Berta, I can't pronounce her name correctly, and Cavazos in the Honduras, and the killing of those who are water protectors in the Amazon rainforest. And I feel like you're talking with us about this little shoot of a plant which could grow and be really strong. But right now it's so fragile, because when somebody kills my daughter or my son, Berta's mom or whatever, it kind of changes things. And so I don't know how restorative justice works in that.
Well, all right. I mean, yes, of course, that's absolutely a crucial question. And, I have to say there's obviously no simple answer to that. And if there is killing involved, there, horror has already begun to spill. I mean, the blood has begun to flow. It's, and when you, bring up, the indigenous, indigenous people, whether it's in Central America or in the United States and Canada or Australia, anywhere where, colonial powers came in and took over, there's deep historic, roots to the problem. So it's so there's clearly no simple answer. Okay, so it's a root that, a plant that can grow and flower, but maybe if we planted, 50 million of them, that, then it would start to look like, something that could deal with the larger issues that you're, you're talking about. I mean, destroy, cultural genocide, and then cultural, I mean, ecocide, what we're doing to the planet, all that stuff requires clear answers, clear, significant, focused, ongoing answers. But even though it's incredibly complex, the answer is never to kill the enemy. I mean, and, I mean, the civil rights movement, was based, emerged out of horrible, the horror that had been done for 300 plus years, from slavery to Jim Crow. So many people, their lives were destroyed. But the civil rights movement that, I mean, there were lots of aspects to it, but the core of it was an incredible, was this incredible movement, that was nonviolent, and the nonviolence had power. It wasn't like a weakness. It had enormous power, and it broke down this side and that side, and one, it allowed, it allowed it, a transracial, a multiracial, you know, process that allowed the races to work together against racism, which was, of course, very important.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to take up all the time.
Oh, no, that's all right. That's a very important question that has to be addressed and has to be looked at.
Well, and is the personal relationship of value still there with all that killing and everything? If I have a personal relationship with an enemy, can that help, right?
Well, I think yes, I think so. I mean, I think that it's necessary and crucial. The more, if the enemy is just the enemy, it's so much easier to kill that person.
Yes.
I mean, that's, if nothing else, there's that.
Yes. Right.
But also, if people actually talk, whether or not they have a personal relationship in terms of friendship, okay, getting back to the idea of restorative justice, everyone's sitting in a circle. I mean, it's a process, and there's not a leader, but there's a person that holds the container, and so say you have a serious issue that is at the level that you're talking about, and people sit together that are on both sides of the issue. I mean, there's a routine, a structure to a peace circle, as this is called. One, there's a talking piece, and you talk when you're holding the talking piece, and when you're not, you listen. And there's no crosstalk. There's no, the dominant people are, you take over, and the shy people say nothing. No, everyone talks. So this is one way to listen to and hear the other side. As you're talking about the, the destruction of indigenous, cultural genocide and all that. I'm not sure I know what would be the side of those that are, that are doing the genocide, but you've got to listen to them and hear them, and just as they are listening to you, and then talk through an issue, and find an issue and a way to solve it.
So we can practice by listening to Fox News, which I don't want to do.
Right? I mean, well, that's a challenge. That is a challenge. Absolutely. But you're right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Giacomo, yeah.
Yeah. So I was actually, what Kate just said regarding Fox News kind of segues very well into the question I was going to ask. And I don't want to politicize any conversation, but I feel like what you're saying, Mr. Koehler, is particularly relevant to the case of political polarization in the United States, and how, like, I feel like there are multiple actors, and there are the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, there are the more centrist Democrats, then there are like the Republicans like Liz Cheney who have denounced President Trump, and then there are those that are that continue asserting that the election lies.
Right.
And it's just, I feel like it's so difficult. Like, how do you think, what do you think it would be an important first step to trying to foster some sort of bipartisan unity when it feels like, the people, the politicians can't even agree on the basics, rules of the game regarding truths, regarding, all these issues that I just feel like they're just so elemental.
Right. Yeah, I mean, once again, a very good, and relevant question. And once again, there's no simple answer. And as you talk, one of the words that often drives me the most batty is the word bipartisan. Like, like say you're a progressive, you give up your values so that you can be halfway to the other side. I mean, like, say one of the parties, is the Nazi party. Are you going to have a bipartisan relationship with them? Okay, we'll only kill some of the Jews. We won't kill all of them. Is that the bipartisan? No, I mean, it doesn't mean giving up your values. I mean, the bipartisanship gets back to what Mary Parker Follett called compromise, and it always looks like it's the progressives wing of the Democratic Party that is supposed to compromise, while the Trump wing of the Republican Party does not compromise, but holds tight to whatever it is they hold tight to. So one, I guess that's how I would start, by saying no, compromise or finding a way to be bipartisan is not the answer. We need a political system that can sit in a peace circle together somehow. And I think part of the problem is the media. The mainstream media is the one that pushes the bipartisanship. I often think of the media as bouncers. Say, you got a presidential debate. It's narrowed down to the most trivial kinds of stuff, and it's more about the color of the tie the candidate is wearing often than it is about the deeper issues. And if it's a real issue, like a big issue, like, pulling out of Iraq or something, often that is totally marginalized. It's not allowed into the debate, and when I look at these, a presidential debate, I'm often just driven, crazy by what is not addressed, and if even a little bit of some kind of an anti-war statement, for instance, is allowed in there, it's usually very cautious and tentative. And the media, who should be pushing for all sorts of things, including that, do not do that. So I think probably, I'm speaking as a member of the media. I see the media as responsible for really, working hard to, create a true debate in this country, a true debate with, and that does not mean marginalizing, all sorts of, movements, but anti-war, save the planet, all these, quote unquote progressive issues that are, you call them progressive and then you just marginalize them. So.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think maybe like, one idea I have is that just kind of like going back to like basic human needs might be a way to, because like everyone, I feel like every human being, has to fulfill their basic human needs. And maybe that's a good way, when we are so polarized, to foster some consensus.
Yeah.
Because then like even like those that are pushing for things that go against basic human needs, or like that would violate other people's basic human needs, they would not be legitimate. I don't really know if what I'm saying makes sense, but yeah, no, this is a great conversation.
Yeah, right. We probably won't solve all of the issues in 45 minutes, but yeah, no, yes, basic human needs, we haven't solved that. That's still front and center, and it has to be in any discussion, any conversation, and respected on all sides of the, all sides. their human needs, my human needs, your human needs. Absolutely. So I see we're at about 12:46 here.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just gonna actually go. I'm gonna copy and paste the link to the main session for the Peace Summit. But Mr. Koehler, thank you so much for taking your time to attend the Peace Summit and to present. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
Well, this is great. Yeah. Thank you very much for having this. It's been great, and yeah, my pleasure to be part of it. So, peace and blessings to all.